We get a weather update at 11 o'clock from the Met Office through to our gritting controller at Newark. He'll relay that message to the four foremen, which I'm one of, and then we relay that down to our crew that we are in charge of. That'll give you the time that we're supposed to be in the yard, the spread rate that we're supposed to be spreading at, and the weather forecast and what they're expecting and what time we're going out due to the weather. We go out with a said lorry full of salt, could be up to 10-12 tonnes on the back, and away you go. You spread it down, and you want to be putting it down a couple of hours at least before the forecast if it's going to drop cold, to help the traffic crush it down into the tarmac. And then hopefully when it goes freezing, it'll not freeze, it just moistens it up again nicely. It's all down to the weight of the traffic and everything else. It's quite a pleasure to be out there. You know you're doing the best that you can. You're putting the salt out there. You're trying to make the roads safe. You're just in your own little world. You know what you've got to do. You put the radio on, heater's nice and warm, and you're away and enjoying it, and off you go. It's peaceful.
This winter, more than ever, with COVID-19 still circulating, we need help to reduce all avoidable risks. You can help protect the NHS, social care and loved ones by getting the flu vaccine. You may be eligible for the free vaccine at your GP or local pharmacy if you are over 65, pregnant or have a long-term condition. Find out if you are eligible at nhs.uk/staywell. Children up to Year 7 can get the free nasal spray at school or through their GP if they are below school age. If you are not eligible for the free vaccine, you can pay for it at your local pharmacy. The flu vaccination does not give you flu. It reduces the risk of catching flu, as well as spreading it to others. If you had the vaccination in the past, that will not protect you, as the flu strain changes every year, so you need to have a new one this year. It is also important to wash your hands often with warm water and soap. Use tissues when you cough or sneeze, and bin used tissues as quickly as possible. Thank you for helping to protect yourself and loved ones this winter.
We get a weather update at 11 o'clock from the Met Office through to our gritting controller at Newark. He'll relay that message to the four foremen, which I'm one of, and then we relay that down to our crew that we are in charge of. That'll give you the time that we're supposed to be in the yard, the spread rate that we're supposed to be spreading at, and the weather forecast and what they're expecting and what time we're going out due to the weather. We go out with a said lorry full of salt, could be up to 10-12 tonnes on the back, and away you go. You spread it down, and you want to be putting it down a couple of hours at least before the forecast if it's going to drop cold, to help the traffic crush it down into the tarmac. And then hopefully when it goes freezing, it'll not freeze, it just moistens it up again nicely. It's all down to the weight of the traffic and everything else. It's quite a pleasure to be out there. You know you're doing the best that you can. You're putting the salt out there. You're trying to make the roads safe. You're just in your own little world. You know what you've got to do. You put the radio on, heater's nice and warm, and you're away and enjoying it, and off you go. It's peaceful.
Thank you. I'd now like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Nottinghamshire Local Pension Board, which is being held remotely, with the majority of the members joining the meeting from their own homes. As well as myself, the other members present in the meeting today are Mark Heppenstall, Tulani Malifi and David Smith. And we also big welcome to advisor to the board, John Raisin. We also have the following officers present today. We have John Clues, the pensions team manager, and the clerk to the meeting, Martin Gately. This is the first virtual meeting of the Nottinghamshire Local Pensions Board to be held in line with the new requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. So please do bear with us if you experience any technical issues. If we do lose any members from the call temporarily, then officers will seek to assist in getting them reconnected as soon as possible, hopefully without the need to halt the proceedings, which we'll try and do. We'll try and keep the meeting flowing. Officers will inform the meeting if they are now able to rectify the problem and if we need the meeting to be paused or adjourned temporarily. Before I come on to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 12th of December, which seems a long while ago now, just to let you know that as the acting chair, I've been to an LGPS meeting where we discussed exit cap and McLeod, which took up most of the meeting. That was on the 26th of October. We had the LGPS meeting on the 2nd of December, and I also attended virtually, I might add, the LAPF Investment Awards last week. So if we move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of December 2019. Everybody's had this as a pre-read, so if I can ask the committee if it can be agreed to make it easier, is anybody against? Thank you, that has been agreed. We'll now move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, and I'll ask the committee clerk, please, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Nottingham City Councillor Sally Longford, who is on other City Council business.
Thank you, Martin. We'll now move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest by members and officers, and they go into 2 categories: disclosable pecuniary interests or private interests, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Does this apply to anyone, please? Thank you. Just to let you know that if you do come across an item and you suddenly realise that you have an interest in it, it's not a problem. Just put your hand up and we'll deal with it there and then. Can I also ask any officers, have you got any private or pecuniary, non-pecuniary interest to declare? No, thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the Local Government Pension Scheme Pension Administration Performance Report, and you can find that on pages 5 to 16 in your agenda pack. So this is the annual report on the performance of the pension admin team up to the 31st of March 2020, which was obviously March this year, and updates the pension board on aspect of pension administration, along with some information on the impact of COVID-19 on the pension administration. John Clues, is there anything you particularly wish to draw the board's attention to, please?
Well, thank you, Chair. I was going to take the board through the report as briefly as possible, given it is quite a weighty report, but there are certain things I will want to draw the board's attention to, and I'm sure they'll probably have some questions as well, Chair. So I'll get started if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this, as the Chair said, this report provides an update on the financial year ending the 31st of March 2020. This was actually presented to Pensions Committee in September of this year. The 2019, just as a bit of a sort of scene setting, I suppose, the 2019 valuation was completed by the scheme actuary on the 31st of March 2020. And contribution rates were issued to scheme employers for the 1st of April 2020. So there was quite a bit of work leading up to that, to those two particular points. In this report, I've added some additional information for the board's for the board's information around pensions administration, and I'll try and point them out as I go through. So each year, the main issue for the administration of the fund has been the performance of scheme employers. We're always, as we've always said, we always do have to chase scheme employers to provide their statutory data, and up to March last year was no different. In terms of the administration itself, I just wanted to give the board a bit of a flavour of some of the main tasks that the admin team do, and I think that puts into context the work that the admin team do over the year. I've also highlighted our establishment figures this year, just again to give you some context of the resources that we hold currently at the time. And I'd just like to say that we are continuing with our GMP project, and we still have a GMP project manager. Each year I tend to put the total cost of the administration, but at the time of writing this, the accounts hadn't been signed off, and so I wasn't able to finalise this. But we're not too far off from the average cost of 2019. But we will be getting our SIPFA data. It should be being produced for us by the end of this month. So we will have a SIPFA report which will confirm our average costs and fund costs, but everything seems to be running a little bit late this year for some reason or other. So data improvement has been high on the agenda, and I will pick that up in the second report that Sarah Stevenson has produced, and she's asked me to present. As you're aware, the admin strategy is also continuing to be followed, which provides a framework for the management of scheme employers' responsibilities to ensure the admin authority receives its accurate data. So data is important to ensure that members are paid correctly, employer costs are reliable, and we have a cost-effective administration, and we avoid the interests of the pensions regulator. Also, as the board is aware, the pensions admin is currently undertaking a number of data improvement activities, and as I've said, we'll pick that up as part of my next report. In terms of current membership, that has gone up, and it will tend to climb. We have had a number of changes in our membership. There are new members coming into the fund, or should I say new employers. We are tending to pick up employers coming in from academy trusts. So there are a number of schools from Derbyshire, for instance, who are part of a Nottinghamshire trust, have actually transferred into the fund. So our membership is actually going up slightly. One of the other things I ought to point out to you and about data is we have been measuring data, and you'll see in point 15 of my report, I've reported our data accuracy. In 2019, we had 59% data accuracy on common data and 60% accuracy on conditional and scheme specific data. We've redone some of our review of data, and there has been a bit of a change, which I should point out. So our common data has gone up to 76% of accuracy. However, our conditional data has decreased to 42.96%. We are going to be reporting that to the pensions regulator. The reason we believe that that data has gone down is because we're more accurately measuring the data, and we have had we've done quite a lot of work with our software provider on a project that we kicked off and we told the board about last year. And again, I'll go on to explain a bit more about that in Sarah Stevenson's report, which I'll present after this. But I can assure you to the board that work is ongoing in terms of data auditing and improvements of data. Our schema, I normally put in a chart or a table in relation to our employers, and you'll see that total scheduled employers is shown at 320. That's now changed to 302 as we've amalgamated a number of school employers into single employers. So where, say, a school academy has got 10 schools and they're all counted as a single employer, we've now brought them into the Academy Trust as one employer, and it makes administration much simpler dealing with one employer rather than 10 separate schools. I normally give, in terms of going forward, one of the things that I felt that the board needed to have some sight of are our complaints and our internal dispute resolution procedure appeals, and I show that starting at point 20, and I've put in a number of tables which I will update annually in terms of the complaints that we have been receiving. So over the previous year up to the 31st of March, we had 25 written complaints. We had 23 that we closed. There were a couple outstanding. We found that 4 were justified, 6 were partially justified, and 13 none at all. These can vary in terms of the types of written complaints. They can be around people's benefits and how the benefits have been calculated. It can be around timing and have we sent information out on time. Generally, the number of complaints we get are people who have claimed their benefits and then wish to change their mind on the benefits that they have claimed. And we certainly have a number of those types of complaints coming forward. And they take a lot of time to actually deal with. Generally, once a member has claimed their benefits, we don't allow them to change them. And generally, it's because they really haven't understood what they are claiming. And it's quite a difficult issue to address. So I just wanted to highlight that, and we'll be bringing further information on that as I collect the information. I always say they're just written complaints. Clearly, we do. People phone up and they ask questions or make complaint, and we deal with them on the telephone. And we don't. It's very difficult to actually log those. But anything that's sent through in an email or a letter that's clearly labelled complaint, we put it in and we monitor it, because sometimes people say they're complaining, but really they're asking just questions for information more than anything else. And then what happens is we sometimes then get formal appeals And as you can see, we had a total of 10 formal appeals last year. We had one upheld, we dismissed 3, and then a number were progressed to stage 2, and we were awaiting a number of decisions. And when they go to stage 2, that means they go and they're dealt with by an independent adjudicator who looks at the case. And once that is completed, they can then go on to the Ombudsman. And we have a few cases that have gone to the Ombudsman, which we're awaiting a response on. I'll take questions later because I'm sure you'll have some questions. Just in terms of the pensions administration, we can continuing to undertake developments and make changes due to statutory changes. I've put a bit of information in here about the employer support and compliance team, and certainly what they have been doing over the year. We are trying to improve our communication methods, work with employers, and review and improve information systems and administrative systems. I'll take you on to a bit of more important stuff. I think it's worth showing in the presentation about data submissions from scheme employers, and we've kept continually monitoring this over the years, and it ebbs and flows with the needs of, or with scheme employers and how they respond. We have had issues this year in terms of scheme data, and some with some larger scheme employers, where they have failed to provide data on time, so have missed the deadline date. One of the things we're going to do to try and address this is move to monthly returns, and this is where scheme employers will be asked to submit their data on a monthly basis rather than an annual basis. However, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to roll that out, especially making sure that the employer's data is correct before we actually roll out them sending new data to us. It's quite a feat, and we have been talking to other pension funds across the LGPS on how they've been doing that piece of work. We've been speaking to Cheshire and East Riding for 2 in particular, and we did actually go and visit East Riding back in, I think it was February time, just before we went into lockdown. As always, I've produced some performance data, and as you can see, I've listed the particular processes, the number of cases, and our performance against our own admin KPIs and against the SIPFA KPIs. I can actually tell you that in terms of nationally, the National Governance Project is looking at a national KPI benchmark, performance indicators, whatever we might want to call them, and they're looking to introduce those once the governance project has been completed, and John's going to talk about that, but it's very evident that we need a set of national KPIs across LGPS so that we can view what our benchmarks are and what our performances are against other funds. But as you can see, some of the big issues are around deaths. I will talk a bit more about that just a bit later on. We tend to focus quite a lot of our work on retirements because making sure people are paid on time and correctly is most important. We have a lot of work to do on deferments and retirement quotations, and transfers out are becoming high profile with the pensions regulator, and we are going to have to look at our transfers in and out, especially out because of pension scams. And the pensions regulator has actually picked it up as a high risk area for funds, in particular over the COVID crisis, where people have wanted to get access to money. So they speak to ourselves. If there's any questions on that, I'll take them later. Moving on, just in terms of completed processes, we are tending to see an increase in workload, and that's particularly shown because of the number of members increasing, but also a number of members coming up to pension age is increasing, and therefore more work is expected of the fund. So we have actually increased in 1920 a 13% increase in workload or in processing. And again, I'll come to a bit more about that when we talk about the project that we've been leading on in terms of transformation. And the final thing I wanted to draw your attention to was, and I mentioned about deaths, and I've put a chart in the report to show deaths and comparison of deaths across a couple of years. I did these to July of actually this year. This isn't last year's. This is actually up to July 2020, and I have got some updated figures for September, October, and November. But I really just wanted to show the impact of the number of deaths compared to previous years over this year, and I think you can see in terms of March, April, and May, although May was slightly down on 2019 and 2018, but has continued to remain relatively high up till July. And then for some reason, I don't know why, I haven't got August, but from September, we had 88 deaths. October, we had 77 deaths. And then in November, we spiked at 136 deaths across the fund. And they're measured as processes of individuals' benefits. So that's a quick run through the report. Like I say, I'm sure you've got some questions for me, so I'll pass back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for all the work you put into these reports. I know you spend a lot of time and effort on it.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you very much for that. Board Advisor John Clues, do you wish to add anything at this stage?
Amazing.
Sorry, John Raising.
John Raising, it's all right.
No, Chair, I'm content, thank you.
Thank you very much. In order to debate this, I'll formally move the recommendations, which are on page 15 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder, please? David, I think you just picked Tulani to that. Thank you very much. Yeah, just a question from myself before I open it up to other board members. I noticed you mentioned at least twice in your report about having to chase scheme employers.
Yes.
And you was talking about arranging it onto a monthly basis. Is there anything we can do to help that? Because obviously you shouldn't have to go around chasing these people. Would a letter from this board to the employers, would that help matters? Is there anything we can do to help?
I think there will be some things that you will be able to help with as a board in the coming months. we will have to do a lot of communication to scheme employers. Our main focus at the moment is really reviewing the data. Once we've had the opportunity to review the data, we will then moving on to a monthly return process. So what we're planning to do is review our data first, and then probably towards the end of or middle of next year start to look at moving people to monthly returns. And in that way, I think we will need some support or some communication to go out to scheme employers with, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, some backup from the board and the pensions committee. So I'll explain a bit more in the transformation project, and then that might bring it a bit more to light to you. But
Lovely.
Thank you. Yes, we will.
Thank you. And before I bring in David, he's got his hand up. This is our opportunity as board members. It's our duty to scrutinise officers and reports. So this is our opportunity to seek questions to anything that you might have an ambiguity or anything that you want to ask. So
Absolutely.
David Smith, please.
John, thank you for your report. Obviously, the first question I would like to ask is, have you got sufficient resource? When you talk about in your point number 7, you were expecting, let's say, 26 people in the pension team, and you'd actually got 23, and interviews were scheduled for September. Did those interviews take place, and did you manage to get some successful candidates?
They did. So I'll put it in context for you, David. In January last year, we advertised and tried to recruit two full-time members of staff. We had no applicants at all.
Gosh.
So we decided to go for a further recruitment, and in when was it? May and June and July we advertised, and I actually asked for an additional 2 posts to go out to advert for, and we had 27 applicants. I don't know whether it was my new type of adverts that attracted them, but
You doubled the salary.
well, no, unfortunately not. So, but to cut a long story short, yes, we then recruited 2 people from the payroll service in the county council, and we recruited 2 young people who had no experience whatsoever, and so we're now training those 4 people in pensions. Having said that, we have and will be losing a number of people over the coming year or so as people retire, etc. So there's always this ebb and flow of resource. What is going to happen is we do need some further resource, and we've started to plan for that, and we'll be coming back to pensions committee and probably yourselves to look for further support for resource, because there's a number of projects that are kicking off nationally. I'm going to talk about one of them in my later report that has an impact on the fund. So the answer to your question is no, we don't, and we will need to look at that.
I think it's very important because obviously, as you've identified, the number of processes completed has gone up 60% in 2 years.
Yes.
Obviously, your team hasn't, and as you say, you've got a lot of new projects coming on board.
Absolutely.
And I would not want you to be under-resourced for something of this importance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tulani, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for your report. Some of my questions were actually put by David.
Sorry, Tulani.
But actually, just a quick one, really, which is, I know that there's going to be the rollout for the monthly one, which you're going to talk to later.
Yeah.
But I was just a bit curious about is it the what the people who are sending in their reports, were they the usual people? And I know that there's a way that we can find them, and have we been able to find them?
Yes, we are finding them against the admin strategy. If Are they the normal ones? No, they tend to ebb and flow. There is one scheme employer who we have had course to write to on a couple of occasions, and one of our larger employers, and they were certainly late, and were late this year, and they were late last year. We have fined them, and we have charged them with additional work. The problem being is that because employers, their staff move and change, so I don't think there are particular good handovers when staff change in some of these employers, and therefore we're almost starting again with new people all the time, and they get things wrong, and we have to put it right. So we're hoping that by focusing on a monthly basis with scheme employees, this will have some improvement. But you don't know until you've done it, I think. But to answer your question fully, yes, there are some that are repetitive. We do find them. Probably we don't find them enough, and we have to chase them. But we do our best, and we do write to them. So that's all we can do, really. That's what we do. We find them. We have reported a couple to the pensions regulator in the past, but I don't think we're going to do that this year, other than we're going to find some people.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. If there are no more comments or questions, I'll move to the vote. So is that agreed? And the easiest way of doing it on Teams is to ask, do we have any votes against? Do we have any votes abstaining? Thank you. Then that is carried. We'll now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Local Government Pension Scheme Transforming Pension Administration Update Report. And you'll find that on pages 17 to 26 in your agenda pack. So this report is presented to update the Pension Board on the progress of a number of projects that fall under the Pension Administration Programme to improve the ways of working, specifically the admin team that have been progressing the data audit. John Clues, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is Sarah's report, but unfortunately she can't be with us today. She's attending a funeral with her, I think it's with her mother. So there was a presentation to the board last year about our intention to set up a transforming pensions administration digital development working program, and this is an update report on where we've got to, and it picks up on some of the issues that we've just discussed in the performance report. So we sought support from yourselves and from the Pensions Committee for additional resource, which we have had and are putting in place. So really, just to update you then, so due to changes in the LGPS nationally and the requirements of the pensions regulator, we, as the LGPS administration, we need to reflect some of the changes through digital services, and that's what we're aiming for. So we want to look at increased automation, reduce manual inputting, amending member data, providing a fulfilling employer role, and people to have access to the pension record 24/7. And they're some of the main objectives of the pensions regulator as well. So the pensions regulator is requiring schemes to interact with the fund via digital platforms. So what are we trying to do? We want to be looking at transforming pension administration through 4 key phases that we've identified. Data audit and improvement, which I've said quite a bit about. A scheme employer portal, and I can actually say that in terms of the employer portal, we have gone live with that. We went live with our largest employer, the county council, and that went live in July. And we're talking to the district authorities. First of all, one of 2 district authorities. We were supposed to be talking to them before Christmas, but it looks like it'll be after Christmas now to roll out the portal to them. We're also looking at hosting options, and that's hosting of the pensions administration system to our software provider who has a hosting solution, and that is down to one of the drivers for that is the county council moving to cloud-based solutions, and we need to be looking at the same sort of thing, and then hopefully moving to a members portal where members can view their pension data online. And I have to say we are a bit behind the curve on that one. So the key aims, as said, are to improve data quality, scheme employers to have portal access, looking at monthly returns for scheme employers, pension members and having self-service, and trying to completely improve the customer experience. So the first thing we've decided to press ahead on is data audit. So the pension funds required by the pension regulator to hold and measure our pensions data, and I've given you an update on that in my previous report. We're also required to respond to a range of external factors. We've talked, I've given previous updates on the GMP reconciliation. We also have the McLeod judgment. Again, there's a separate report on that. And we're also going to be required to provide data for the National Pensions Database. In our data audit, we set up that we started, we've completed phase 1 and phase 2, and they're actually highlighted in the actual report. We're now on to phase 3, which is around actually undertaking some of the data improvement and going out to scheme employers to collect data. And we're at the point at the moment we've produced a communication to scheme employers, and we'll be going out to some of the bigger employers in the new year. Talked about monthly returns. We would like to move to monthly returns following the improvements in the data quality. And just to say what monthly returns actually is at the moment we collect everybody's data at year end. That takes a lot of time in balancing and checking. So what some schemes have started to do is with their big employers, they've initiated basically a year-end return every month where we balance the data each month, send back queries on data each month, get them back each month, and then we continuously updating data in real time, so that when we get to year end, hopefully all that will balance and we'll get a quicker year end and hopefully have more accurate annual benefit statements that we send out to scheme members. So that's the theory of monthly returns. Yeah. I've mentioned about hosting systems, and that's picked up pretty clearly in the report. The scheme employer portal, as I said, we've gone live with the county council. We see that this is a huge benefit to the fund. It'll be less paper coming into the fund, or less scanning of data coming into the fund, and scheme employers will be able to pass data through the portal. They'll be able to see their members, some of their members' records, not all of it, but some of their members' records, and request actions on those member records. For example, request estimates of benefit for retirements or redundancies and that kind of thing. In the report, we pick up about resources. So we will be looking at some additional project management capacity. And certainly, as I've said earlier, if additional resources are required, then these will be subject to a further report, and will certainly seek support from the Pensions Board. I think that's a quick run through of the report. Again, Chair, I suspect Pension Board members may have some questions, so happy to take questions.
Thank you, John, and thank you again for your report. Again, I'll call on the board advisor, John Raisin. Do you wish to add anything to what's been said, John?
Is it there?
John Raisin?
Sorry, Chair. No, I'm content again.
Thank you. So,
actually, Chair, sorry, there's one thing I would say. I would reiterate what John Clue said about resourcing. The resourcing is going to be a major issue, and it is something which I'll come to later on the good governance review, and it has been a concern of the good governance review. I was a member of the phase 2 groups, both the phase 2 groups that produced that national report. I'm a member of the phase 3 working group as well. And resourcing is a major issue that nationally there are concerns about, and there's national support to help ensure that funds do get recognition, because we do realise that councils will be under financial pressures post-COVID, but that would not be a reason to deny pension funds proper resourcing, because we know the pension fund is a separate fund from the general fund. I'd just like to say that resourcing is crucial, and general council finances shouldn't be used as a reason not to support pension funds, because they are separate pots of money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. That was really useful. Thank you. So to debate the motion, I'll formally move it. Do I have a seconder, please? That's Mark. Thank you very much, Mark. Before I open it up to the board, just a quick question from me, John. You mentioned the interaction by digital and the customer portal,
yep.
And you mentioned that we're behind the curve with it. Is this something that we're likely to catch up with, or does it just go on its own head of steam?
It will go on its own head of steam, really, Chair, because what's tended to happen is we've been moving forward and trying to move forward on the employer portal, and then things tend to get in the way. So we've had GMP reconciliation, which we're still continuing to deal with and to address. We've also started the data audit, as I've said, and we really can't go on to having a members portal until we've addressed our data issues, because obviously you don't want to open up a portal and let people see their data that isn't correct. So, and I'm not saying the majority are incorrect. I'm saying there are some data issues that tends to slow down our business processing, because when you come up against, say, for example, I'll give you an example. So, say we're somebody's taking retirement, and they send in their pack, and you start to do the calculation, and you might find there's an anomaly in some of the salary details that have been passed on by the employer, for example. So we have to go back and check those. We may have to go back to the employer and ask them for an update on pay, etc., before we can actually do the calculation, and that actually slows the thing down. So so that's one of the issues that we tend to have. So we must get that correct before we open up a portal to members. So we, like I say, we are a little bit behind the curve on that, but other things tend to take priority. So and I'll come to one or two of those things as we go forward. But McLeod certainly is a big thing on the horizon.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John. Tulani, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, John, for your presentation. I just got one question, actually. It's I really welcome the move to digital, because I know one of the things is that's how things are going, and I'm sure COVID has probably had a massive impact on it, forcing people really to kind of be using more electronic devices. One of the things is obviously when you do open the portal, there'll be different people on different systems. Will how secure will the portal be, and how easy do you foresee it being for the end user who might not necessarily be that IT savvy?
Well, they keep saying to us that everybody uses Amazon, don't they? So a good example is everybody uses Amazon. So it's supposed to be as user friendly as that kind of interface. So we have seen it used. The big issue when you're opening the other funds have experienced is they're well received. It's well received, and it all depends on what you offer on the portal. So people obviously aren't going to use it if you've got inaccurate information. They'll just turn off. So as I said earlier, data is important. But the other thing is some schemes have struggled to get people engaged in using it. You get something like, I think some of them have had something like, in the early stage, something like 26% take up, which isn't a lot really on a big fund. And it's just people's, for some reason, they'll prefer to go to Amazon than they prefer to go and have a look at their pension. So there's a lot of work to be done in getting engagement with scheme members. So it won't be straightforward. We might, and certainly other funds have struggled with that, but it is getting better, and you just have to keep working at it and educate people to use the portal. So force people. So if somebody wants a retirement quote, for example, and they can get it online, or they can come to you, we were saying, well, yes, we'll do you a quote, but it'll take us, let's say, for example, 2 months. But if you go on the portal, you can have it tomorrow. Do you see what I mean? So it's that kind of give and take, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. David, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one as regards to the monthly returns, John, please.
Yeah.
Is it going to be an all or nothing approach whereby every employer has to do it on a monthly basis, or are you going to take a piecemeal approach? So the people who can do it should be getting on with it, which will hopefully give you more resource to focus on the troublesome people, shall we say, at the year end.
That's a good question, David, because we haven't really come to a decision on that. I think what we will do is we'll certainly go down the largest scheme employer route. So some of the bigger scheme employers will come on to it because whilst what we understand is that when it's been implemented elsewhere, whilst it's there to make things easier, the initial rollout is not easy.
No,
So
I can imagine.
Over the
Presumably, particularly if you're doing it midway during the year, because you'll have to do like 6 months worth and then monthly. So.
Absolutely. So yes, you're absolutely right. We will probably go for a rollout to specific employers first of all.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments? Thank you. We'll move to the vote then. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. We'll now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is Local Government Pension Scheme update on the progress on the impact of the MacLeod judgment on the administration of the pension fund. And you'll find that on pages 27 to 40 of your agenda pack.
Yep.
So this is to update the board on the MacLeod judgment to enable the board to understand the impact on the administration of the pension fund. The report also includes a copy of the administrating authority's response to the consultation for information. Like I said, I did go to a chair's meeting earlier on, a couple of months back, and the whole meeting was taken up by this and the pension cap. So, John, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this as short as I can, but try and just explain some of the impact on the administration, really. So, so just to state the obvious, the report explains the activities the pension fund sort of we're going to be required to do. It also obviously gives you a bit of background in terms of how the MacLeod case came about and where it stemmed from in terms of our sergeant who was employed by the London Fire Brigade and the actual taking of the case to the Supreme Court, and then on what the actual proposals actually are. I'll get right to the point, really. The issue for the fund is that in the judgment they identified that some members of the schemes had been discriminated against, and therefore what schemes are going to be required to do is to go back over their records and look and check and recalculate members' benefits against the MacLeod judgment. And this might mean some members getting increased pensions. It might also mean some have been overpaid, but we don't think that's going to be the main case. The majority is going to be people are going to be underpaid. And what we're required to do as a fund is to go back to our scheme employers to enable this project to happen, is to seek data from scheme employers. So we're going to have to go back, ask scheme employers, and this goes back to 2012, and they're going to have to provide data to us, and then the fund is going to have to load that data against the records and then do a number of recalculations of of scheme members' benefits. And the main issue is the recalculation of scheme member benefits for those who are retired. And what we've done, and at the moment, we've only done, forgive my phraseology for this, but on the back of a fag packet, we've done some calculations in relation to how many scheme members are impacted. And we reckon there's around 24,000 records that are impacted on the scheme. Now, we need to do some more work on getting a more accurate figure, and our software provider is going to be providing some reports for us to enable to interrogate our data and our members to understand whether that 24,000 is actually correct. Then once we've done that, we will then be going out to scheme employers and requesting data. We have to collect that data by the end of March 2021. And then we have to do the calculations for the end of March 2022. We're hoping that some of the changes in the software in the admin system will enable that to happen, but we have no doubt we will or may have to do some manual calculations. But again, it's a bit of a finger in the air at the moment, other than we know we've got to recollect data. So we're setting up a project to do this, and as I say, we don't really know too much of the implications till we've had chance to run our data, and I'm hoping that the software provider is going to give us those reports. What's the date today? Oh, they should be coming today, in fact. So hopefully we'll be able to identify the impact over the coming weeks, so that we can get a standard template sent out to scheme employers, so that they can start providing us their data. One of the good things about this, if it can be a good thing, is that in 2014 the scheme continued to collect certain data following the introduction of the 2014 regulations, which didn't require us to collect certain data, and we continue to do that. So we have some of that data that that we wouldn't have had otherwise. The other issue is going to be whether scheme employers can provide that data, mainly because if, for example, schools, they've changed their payroll providers over a period of time and may not hold some of that data. So there's a lot of, to quote another phrase, water to go under the bridge, and it is quite a substantial piece of work for what will be possibly very little impact. While some members will need an uplift in their pension, there aren't going. Whilst we've got to look at 24,000 records, won't necessarily be that many people impact, we don't think. So really, that's what that report covers. Gives you a bit of detail, but the main impact is what I've explained there. Plus, also, we did respond to the consultation, and mainly that's really saying this is just going to create a lot of work for pensions administration when we've got a lot of things to do as it is. So that's my report, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I call on the board advisor, John Raisin? Is there anything you wish to add to this?
Oh, can you hear me? John?
John Raisin?
Don't.
No. Okay. Well, we'll move on. We'll move on. So To debate this issue, I'll formally move the recommendations. They're on page 32 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder, please? Tulani, thank you very much. Before I open it up to the board, John, it was mentioned at the meeting, our chair's meeting, that it might adversely affect members, and there was talking that boards may want to put in mitigation towards that. Have you considered that part of it? I know we've spoke a lot about the people that are probably going to gain for it, but there's a chance, well, there's a good chance that some, even though it may be a small number, might be adversely affected.
Yeah, I mean, some funds are saying that, but I've had my technical team have a look at it, and we're not so sure that's the case. But I will be. I think I'll know more once we've done a review of the data, as I said, through our reporting. But we're of the opinion we don't think it will, but quite clearly, if there is need for mitigation, then we will have to put that into place. It'll be very similar to the GMP reconciliation and mitigation. So good communication, writing out to individuals, breaking the bad news. We haven't. You're right. It needs considering. We're not there yet, I think, is my response.
Thank you, John. Tulani, please.
Thank you again, John.
Okay.
And thank you, Chair. Actually, just a quick one. First, it was going to be, I was going to ask about the retrospectiveness of how far we can go back. And I did pick that up in terms of the information that, it's 10 years from April 2012. But however, it does mention that it's within the normal pension age. Now, the pension age has moved. Will that have any impact on that judgment in terms of going forward and what actions we'll have to do?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question, Arnie, to be honest. Because they've said that it shouldn't go past 2022. But there's some thoughts that it might have to. But I honestly can't answer that question other than what we know at the moment. Because they're saying it should cease at that particular point, but I honestly don't know. I can't answer your question at this point in time. And maybe when we're a bit on and we've got some data and we've looked at some of the cases, we might understand it a bit more. But it's a good question. But I can't. I'm ever so sorry. I can't actually answer your question at this point in time.
Oh no, that's fine. I know that just reading from the thing, I thought there'd be loads of bits in there that you just need time in order to be teased out. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think we are expecting some more advice on it as well from the LGA. So so we'll wait and see on that one, and maybe you can ask me that next time, and I might be able to answer it for you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
If you do come across it or it does arise, if you could perhaps write to the board members, just let them know. If you do it to Lani and just copy us in. If not, it can perhaps be something for the next meeting to address.
Absolutely, we'll give that some thought, and obviously we are planning some further meetings, so we can build that in just to give you an update on where we are as well. So lovely. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Mark, please.
Yeah, it's mainly just give the answers. Just giving the answers. It's when do we get the results of the data and how many it will affect. That's
well, I'm hoping to do like I say, I'm hoping to run some of these reports. I was hoping to do it before Christmas so we could get a good idea. What we might have to do though is once we've run our reports and got our data, I might go back to the scheme actuary and ask the scheme actuary to do some work in actually providing some of that information that you've just asked for, because we're going to have to interrogate the data and look who it does impact on. We might not get it down to actual individuals as such. I'm hoping so, but really we won't know that until we've got data back from scheme employers. But I might be able to give you some idea of the numbers involved and possibly some of the scheme employers that are impacted.
Right, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments, we'll move to the vote. So do we have any votes against? Any abstentions? No, thank you very much. That is then carried. We'll now move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Local Government Pension Scheme reform of local government exit payments. And you'll find this on pages 41 to 46 of your agenda pack. So this report explains a change in legislation that impacts all of the public sector and how the pension fund proposes to implement an arrangement to protect the pension fund until such time as the LGPS regulations are amended. John, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right. So I'd just like to, before I start, Chair, I just need to point out just an amendment to my report. It's got, and I'm just looking for it now, actually. Yes, sorry. Just in point 2 of the report, Chair, it actually says the report also seeks approval for the fund's proposed solution, and that sounds as if I'm asking you for some money. So if I just point out, it's the fund or the funds,
Yeah,
meaning the pension fund. So apologies for that, Chair. So this report explains a change in legislation that impacts on the public sector and how the pension fund proposes to implement an arrangement to protect the fund until such time as the LGPS regulations are amended. You may be aware that the government first announced proposals for an exit cap across the public sector in 2015. So in July of this year, Her Majesty's Treasury published the government's response to that consultation and laid the implementing arrangements in Parliament that came into effect from the 4th of November 2020. And that legislation listed the employees impacted by the new regulations, including some but not all of the of members of the LGPS. So the new regulations came into force on the 4th of November 2020. The new regulation prevents public sector organisations from paying severance payments of more than 95k. So 95k can be made up of redundancy payments, other discretionary payments that a scheme employer chooses to pay, plus also the cost of pension released early, and that's called the pension strain in the LGPS. So the LGPS regulations, as they currently stand, provide that where an employee is aged 55 and is made redundant or their employment is terminated for reasons of business efficiency, they are entitled to immediate payment of enhanced pension benefits, and the employer must pay a strain charge to the fund. So the issue for the LGPS is, or the issue for the LGPS with this change is that the pension regulations have not been brought into line with the change in legislation, and therefore the pension fund is faced with a difficult decision. We must either follow the LGPS regulations and pay unreduced pension benefits, or follow the exit payment regulations and pay reduced benefits. So the issue has been debated nationally by the Scheme Advisory Board, by the LGA and MHCLG, Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and us as the pension fund has also taken legal advice on how to mitigate the breach of regulations. So given all that, we've come to a bit of a decision, or a proposal, which is very similar to a number of other funds, or most of the funds, I should say, in the LGPS. Therefore, as an interim measure, until the pension regulations are brought into line with the exit cap regulations, I know this is a bit tongue-tying, and to protect the fund, it's proposed to implement the following. Any case that falls below the 95k, and as long as it's confirmed by the scheme employer, the pension fund will continue to pay full pension benefits. So that means the scheme employer has to confirm that with the pension strain and their severance payments that they choose to pay, that it falls below 95k, we will pay full benefits. However, any case that falls above 95k and is confirmed by the scheme employer, taking into account obviously the pension strain calculation that the scheme that we provide to the scheme employer, the fund is deciding that we'll only pay fully reduced benefits or offer deferred benefits. So, and as part of this process, I need to say as well is that the fund will also inform the member being paid that we're paying fully reduced benefits, that they have an option to raise an appeal through the internal disputes resolution procedure. As the fund, because the fund has taken this decision of not following the pension regulations, and it's also anticipated that some of these appeals, if they do go through, will reach the Ombudsman. So we've taken the view with legal advice to go against the pension regulations and pay fully reduced benefits, but giving the member the option to raise an IDRP. And the reason for that is that this has been advised by the Scheme Advisory Board, and by the time we get to the probably the Ombudsman, and there are going to be, and the LGA are talking to the Ombudsman, there will be some, I suppose, I forget what they call them now, class cases where a single case may be heard. We may have the new regulations in place, and therefore we'll be able to review the benefits that we've actually paid to those people if they have gone on redundancy and gone on fully reduced benefits. We're not expecting the regulations to be changed until March 2021. We don't think that at the earliest. So just to put it in a nutshell, the LGPS have been put in a very difficult situation by the government changing the bringing in the exit cap regulations and not aligning the pension fund regulations to that change. So it's one or the other, basically. And from a fund point of view, we've decided that to ensure protection of the fund, to make sure that if anybody Because if a person goes on redundancy and we pay full benefits, the scheme employer won't be allowed to pay the pension strain over and above 95k. So therefore, the scheme, the pension fund could lose out on paying benefits without getting back the pension strain cost, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. That's my report.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to really back up what John Clues has said. This is a very difficult position for local government pension scheme, because the LGPS rules state, as John has said, that a full unreduced pension should be paid if someone is made redundant over 55. But there are now Treasury originated regulations which effectively prevent this or contradict this, and therefore there is a contradiction. And the Scheme Advisory Board, which is a national body looking at the LGPS, have to think about this. And I have come to this set of advice which John has talked about, which basically says that if the value is above 95k of the benefits being paid, and the strain cost is more than 95k with other benefits paid, the reduced pension or deferred pension should be offered. So that is a national guidance. Now, there are likely to be challenges. Whichever way the fund went, there would be a challenge. If the fund was to continue to pay unreduced benefits, there is an issue there about ultimately could they recover money which were overpaid. If they pay reduced benefits, then a member obviously may challenge, because the member will say, well, the regulator pays for paying full benefit. It is very difficult, but the safest course of option, and this is where the Scheme Advisory Board has come from, and the Local Government Association as well, is to pay the reduced benefits or a deferred pension at this point, pending final regulations and the various legal challenges which we think are inevitable. So the fund is protecting itself and doing what it should do, because otherwise, you know, it could find itself in a position of having to chase either an employer, and as John has said, the employer cannot legally pay more than 95k, or a member. So it could be they pay out to a member a full unreduced pension and have to go and try and get that money back, which would be an extremely difficult position. And that is why the prudent approach is what the Scheme Advisory Board has advised, which is to pay the reduced pension or a deferred pension. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. That was really useful. Thank you for that explanation. I'd like to formally move the recommendations, which are on page 45 of the agenda pack. Can I just be clear that John amended the purpose of the report, not the recommendation, which still stands, and that is to acknowledge the proposals on implementing the interim arrangements for the pension fund. So I will formally move that. Do I have a seconder, please? That's David Smith. Thank you very much. Right, Jonathan, sorry, did you want to come in at this point?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I meant to just say as well, just to finalise it, just in terms of the update on the regulations, I should have really said as well that when those regulations are amended, this is going to make it more complicated in terms of severance payments, because in the regulations, and I've sort of outlined a few things, members are going to have choices, or they're proposing to give members choices on how they pay for the pension strain. And I think, given at the moment, as I said earlier in one of my other reports, the complexity of the of the fund at the moment and how people choose to request their benefits, certainly going forward, it's going to get more complicated for members how to choose what benefits they would take under the new regulations. That's what we believe anyway. So I thought it's worth just pointing that out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. Mark, please.
Jonathan,
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, excuse my ignorance. Can you just explain the calculation again, please?
The calculation.
Yeah, for the 95k.
Oh, right. What's included? Generally, and this is actually, I'm going to throw this back. This is actually a decision of scheme employers, but generally what's included in the cap is the pension strain. So that's the cost of releasing the pension early, the redundancy payment, and if a employer pays an additional discretionary redundancy enhancement, plus I think they're going to include pylon in that, I think, in some circumstances. So the main three is the strain, the redundancy cost, and the discretionary redundancy payment, and any other payment that the scheme employer pays as part of a severance to a contract of employment.
Does that include AVCs, Jonathan?
No, it doesn't.
Oh.
No, absolutely not. No, because they're personal to the individual. So no, it doesn't. It's generally a cost on the employer that's being included in the calculation.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments, then we'll move to the vote. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. We'll now move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the Local Government Pension Board Review, 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020. And you'll find that on pages 47 to 54 in your agenda pack. So this report will be presented by John Raisin, advisor to the board, and reviews the activity of the pension board for that period, 1st of April 19 to 31st of March 2020. John Raisin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll actually put the camera off if you don't mind, because I know sometimes the sound goes a bit funny. I leave it on, so I'll put it off.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, this report covers the period of the board from the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. I believe to start by reminding us of the purpose of the board, which is essentially to assist the administrative authority, which is Nottinghamshire County Council, through the Pension Fund Committee. The bottom of the first page, page 50, I refer to the fact that the terms of reference require at least 2 meetings a year. And we had 2 meetings during the last financial year, which were held on the 11th of September 2019 and the 12th of December 2019. And the agenda items considered at each meeting are shown on the table, which is essentially on page 51 of the agenda. I'd just like to thank James Lacey, who was the chair from April 16 to September 19, and now Councillor Tony Harper, who's chaired the board since. The number of meetings to be held isn't specified in the regulations or in any statutory guidance issued by MHCLG. But recently, the pensions regulator did recommend in a report on the LGPS in September 2019 that we should move to quarterly meetings. And I think that's an issue which we may talk about later, but I would just point that out. That's just a recommendation, mind you. I then go on to look at what are the principal issues we've considered during 2019-20. I think I'll begin by saying that knowledge and understanding are absolutely prerequisite if board members are to be able to participate properly and understand. And that's why we've had the LGPS updates at both meetings. And we covered a number of major issues, for example, the good governance project, the cost control process, and the cloud, consultation on the actuarial valuations, the scheme advisory board draft responsible investment guidance. So hopefully those gave the board a good insight into the background of the scheme, so they could understand better the Nottinghamshire specific reports which John Cleves and Kieran led on. Each meeting also looked at risk management. That's an issue which both SIPFA and the pensions regulator believe is crucial and fundamental to the LGPS. I think it was pleasing that the board not only considered risk management, but the board members actually asked questions and raised challenges. Pensions admin remained, I think, as it should do, the primary focus of the board. This is a board made up of employer and employee members. Both meetings received a detailed pensions admin report and also a report on the transformation of pensions admin using digital developments. Asset pooling has been another issue that's been loomed large in the LGPS since 2015. Again, in 2019-20, the board continued to receive both reports and all information on asset pooling, specifically at both national level and how it impacted on the Nottinghamshire Fund. I think one important point to state is I again pointed out to you that the responsibility for investment strategy, which is a primary determinant of return, remains with the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund, and it's only the implementation of investment strategy, which is a secondary issue, which is delegated to the LGPS Central Pool. I went to the Pension Fund Committee on the 12th of March 2020 to present the board review from the previous year. I have to say that it was very pleasing to go to the committee. The chair gave me ample opportunity to explain the background to the report and the content, and following the presentation, members of the committee made a number of observations and comments, and I felt that the committee was genuinely interested and appreciative of the work of the pension board. Obviously, training and development is a big issue, and again, I just say towards the bottom page 53 that you received updates on both occasions that you met last year. And towards the end, I finally thank the officers who have supported the board throughout the year, and that really is the report. And having considered it, the recommendation I think from John is that this is now remitted to be taken to the next suitable meeting of the Pension Fund Committee to be presented to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. So I formally move the recommendations which were discussed. Do I have a seconder, please? That's Tilani. Thank you very much. And we'll now move on to any comments or questions. John, first of all, if I can just ask you, on page 61 of the report, it refers to the Local Government Association to consider establishing a peer review process for LGPS funds. What type of form would that take? Have you got any indication on that, John?
Yeah, I think you've moved on to the next paper, Chair.
Sorry,
Chair, you've just moved on to the next paper on the LGPS update. We were just looking at the paper on the annual report.
Oh, right, sorry. Yeah.
I can answer the question, Chair, but do you want to wait till we've gone through that report?
Yes, please. Yeah. Have we got any more questions or comments, please? Yep, David.
Is there an intention to go to quarterly meetings?
I think that's a matter that's going to be discussed later, David.
Okay. It's just that obviously we're conscious of running out of time to get to in this year.
I think any move towards 4 would be for next year. I mean, this is a recommendation. I think this has been an exceptional year. We haven't met since last December because of the exceptional circumstances. So I think anything that does happen, I'm not presupposing what might or might not happen. That's obviously an issue between, for the board members and officers and the administration authority to discuss. But it wouldn't happen in this financial year, no.
Okay.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments, please? If not, we'll move to the vote. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That has been carried. So we'll now move on to item 9, Nottinghamshire Pension Board LGPS update, and you'll find that on pages 55 to 70 in your agenda pack. So on page 55 of the pack, we have a paper prepared by our advisor, John Raisin, to update the board on the LGPS nationally. And this paper, I can just remind you, it is a noting paper. So, John, would you like us to talk us through it, please?
Thank you, Chair. What I was proposing to do was to stop after each section, because this is a long report, it's 15 pages, and I apologise for that, but I think it's necessary given the time since we last met and the developments that have been. The paper concentrating on three main issues, which is looking at the actuarial valuation and also in the context of coronavirus, because people may wonder how did it affect the valuation, as the valuation was finalised at the same time the coronavirus began. Looking at scheme governance, the good governance review, which we looked at previously, there have been further developments. Also, a Supreme Court case that has affected the LGPS, which has been much talked about. And I just briefly want to report back on the consultation last year on the valuation cycle, a brief update on investment pooling, and then just the report to the pension fund committee I referred to, just the annual review. So to turn first of all to the actuarial valuation, and I'll stop after the valuation. On the 31st of March, the actuary to the fund presented the findings of the valuation and issued the rates and adjustment certificate, which fixed the employer contribution for the next 3 years. Using the assumptions that were agreed with Nottinghamshire County Council, the value of the fund was 5.8 billion, or the liabilities of 5.8 billion, the assets of 5.4 billion, a deficit of 405 million, and a funding level of 93%. That compared to a funding level of 87% at the 2016 valuation. Therefore, all employers in whole had improved their funding level. I would, however, say that when you look at actuarial valuation, it is only a deficit or surplus on a particular day in time using a particular set of assumptions. So therefore, it's important to look behind the figures. What do they really mean? Well, if you look at the valuation report and we'd use the assumptions of 2000. Hello, can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, we can hear you, John, but it's very broken up and not very good reception, but we can just hear you.
Okay, I'll try and come close. Is that any better? Is that any better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better, John.
Right, okay. So if we look at how the actuary made assumptions in 2016, if those assumptions being used, or 2019, those assumptions being used again, the fund would have actually been 104% funded. However, the reason for that is because the investment returns have been extremely good. But in preparing the valuation for the 2019 valuation, the actuary has to look at assumptions going forward again. So the actuary revisited the assumptions in liaison with the fund, and effectively, the most important thing they've done is to reduce the discount rate, which is the assumed investment return, from 5.4 to 4.8%. And therefore, on that basis, the funding level is not 104%, but 93%. But that is a more prudent funding basis. And I would suggest that given the way the investment returns have been and are likely to be going forward, that was a sensible approach. The latest valuation report was issued just after coronavirus had effectively started to impact markets, which was around about the 24th of February. So the question is, should the valuation have been adjusted? Well, the actuary did not believe so. And the actuary said on page 16 that their funding model is designed to withstand short-term volatility. And although there have been falls in markets, the falls are not as great in terms of the modelling because the model is a long-term model. And also they reminded us that things will be considered again in 2022. So was this appropriate? Well, I think the answer is a pretty resounding yes, for a number of factors which are covered on page 58. First of all, the LGPS is an open scheme, strong covenant due to the fact that it's primarily councils who are members. The fact that at the 31st of March, it was very uncertain how COVID would affect the LGPS long term. The three other actuarial firms, there's four who service the LGPS, they had all made the same decision not to change their valuations. And particularly during March 2020, governments and in particular central banks took huge efforts to support financial markets. And by the 31st of March, there was clear evidence these actions were working. Financial markets, stock markets were going up again. So it was clear that there wouldn't be a meltdown. And since March 2020, there's been significant recovery. And in fact, the fund was actually valued at just over 5.6 billion as at 30 September 2020, compared with 5.4 billion at March 19. So I think the evidence all suggests he actually was absolutely appropriate in the approach he took. I'll stop there, Chair, and if anybody wants to ask anything about the valuation process, perhaps we could cover that first, and then I'll go on to the good governance next.
Yeah, thank you. So the valuation part of the document, you was a little bit unclear, John, at times, but I think we've got the gist of it. Tulani, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, John. Apologies, I seem to have dipped out, and I hope I'm not mentioning anything that's been mentioned previously when my signal seemed to go. But just a quick question, which was on the funding level. Obviously, part of the actual valuation is obviously to try and get us to 100%. Is it possible? Does the valuation actually allow the fund to go beyond 100%?
Yeah, yes, it does. I mean, there are some funds which are over 100% funded. The thing to remember, though, as I've said, it is a measure at a particular point in time using particular assumptions. And the big thing with the LGPS, of course, is it's an open defined benefit scheme. So even if you reach 100% funding or even exceed it, you still have a big mountain to climb going forward, because new benefits are, you know, an accrual rate of 1/49th, which is a quite generous accrual rate, and therefore funds, you know, will still need to work hard to achieve returns going forward. So getting to 100% is good, but it is not the end of the journey, because the journey never ends.
That okay, Tulani?
It is, and thank you very much. And a very quick one, which is obviously with COVID, and I think some of these will be mentioned in the risk register. One of the biggest one being obviously what's happening in property, and the big stores going into administration. The next valuation is due to be, is it 2023? Will they be an interim valuation, or will we have to wait until the next valuation? Again, with things like COVID taking place. And thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulani. John?
Yeah, my view would be there will be no interim valuation. I would very much doubt that any fund would go to an interim valuation. The next valuation is as of the 31st of March 2022. So we're nearer to that valuation than the last one. Yeah, you're right. Some property funds have had a rather difficult time. But what I would say is that, and I'm not speaking specifically about Nottinghamshire funds. You know, I'm not the investment advisor of Nottinghamshire, so I can't speak about the Nottinghamshire fund specifically. But the LGPS generally, allocations to property probably somewhere between 5 and 10%. But even within those allocations, I think the likelihood that LGPS funds are exposed to very poorly performing property funds are unlikely. I think LGPS tends to be invested with the better funds and better managers. The sort of areas I think you were referring to, Tulani, retail, etc., or poorer retail. Certainly the funds that I deal with, which isn't Nottinghamshire, but I am an advisor to 3 London funds. Those funds, they've been aware of difficulties for some years, and they are with managers who have been exiting or have exited those sort of investments some time ago. And I suspect that's a general trend in the LGPS. So I wouldn't be over concerned about property exposure in the LGPS in general.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. John, do you want to carry on, or?
Yeah. No, I'll carry on with the good governance. You've previously had presentations on the good governance review, and I think this project is the most important thing that's happening in the LGPS at the moment, because it will fundamentally enhance and strengthen the governance of individual LGPS funds, and the government is committed to this. The Scheme Advisory Board is leading on it, but the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government have been represented throughout on this, so there is government commitment to this. In July 2019, Hyman Robertson produced an initial report, and then in November, working with two working groups consisting of officers, advisors, investment consultants, actuaries. I was fortunate enough to actually to be the independent advisor rep on those two groups, that they produced a second report. And I've summarised their recommendations on pages 60 and 61 of the agenda. And there are some fairly significant recommendations there. The first one of which is that the MHCLG will be asked to produce guidance, statutory guidance, to effectively make these new requirements compulsory upon schemes. So there will be no choice. This will be a nationally implemented new governance regime. First important thing they're proposing is that each fund will have a named single officer who will be responsible for all aspects of the fund, whether that's investment, administration, funding, governance. Everything will be under a single officer. That's not always the case in all funds. It's not the case at Nottinghamshire at the moment, because pensions admin, I understand, reports essentially to HR, and pensions investment essentially to finance. That's not unusual. That happens in a number of places. The recommendation in future is it will be under one senior officer ultimately. There's also a view that there should be enhanced requirements for training for officers and for pension committee members. Because remember, pension committee members, although they make the decisions, actually are under a lower obligation at the moment in law than you are to have knowledge and skills, even though you don't make decisions. Also, there's going to be requirements that administration authorities actually set out training plans and publish training plans and monitor them. The greater emphasis on pension admin strategies. Nottinghamshire already has one, but some funds don't. There's going to be a set of national performance indicators. John referred to these earlier, to measure funds against. Interestingly, each administration authority must give proper consideration to pay and recruitment policies and appropriate supplements relevant to pensions, both for investment and admin staff. And it's recommended they do not apply general council policies on pay and conditions necessary to the pension fund. And crucially, each administration authority will undergo a 2-yearly independent governance review by an outside body, which will then report back to the Scheme Advisory Board. Scheme Advisory Board will look at this, and they may come back and put recommendations to the fund. But if they are particularly concerned, they can escalate to the pensions regulator or ultimately to the MHCLG itself. So this is going to be a big change. So this report was considered by the Scheme Advisory Board in November 19. It was agreed that it be published and that work proceed on phase 3. And that did begin phase 3 early this year. Unfortunately, COVID has intervened and slowed the work down, but there has been progress. And in November, the Scheme Advisory Board received papers from Hyman Robertson covering the issue of the senior officer, the statutory guidance, the independent governance review, and they have recommended that further work be undertaken and that for finalised proposals come back in February 2021 to the meeting of the Scheme Advisory Board. Once that's happened, the Scheme Advisory Board will look at these and then they will make recommendations and share these with the MHCLG. It is difficult to say when will these become compulsory. Well, the MHCLG have indicated because of other issues such as 95k cap and McLeod, they won't be able to look at this for perhaps a period of 6 months. And any consultation, of course, normally takes 6 months because you have 3 months to consult and 3 months for the government to think about the responses. So I suggest that it's not until probably late 2021 or more like sometime in 2022 that these proposals will come into play. But when they do, they will be a very significant move. And I think they are actually very positive because this is a way to make sure that funds are properly administered, properly governed with proper resourcing. And I think the LGPS itself, the Scheme Advisory Board and the government, are acting very positively in seeking to make sure that funds, and remember, Nottinghamshire has £5.5 billion worth of investments and over 140,000 individual members. It is a huge undertaking that it's done, as well as possible. So I would welcome this initiative by the Scheme Advisory Board and the government to improve the governance of the LGPS. And I'll finish there, Chair, and wait questions.
Thank you very much, John. As I say, just the one from me. Do you have any more information on the peer review?
No, that was a what that was a recommendation that rather like you have a peer review for other things like adult social care or children's services at the request of an authority, that if an authority requested that the LGA might set up a similar peer review for LGPS funds. That's what was felt about it. But essentially it would be there in a sense to the side to help funds achieve the good governance, but it wouldn't actually be part of the actual reforms. So it would be an aid to authorities.
Yeah, as Chair of Adult Social Care Public Health in the county, I have found these peer reviews are really useful, a lot more useful than a lot of reviews actually. So it was just something that I was interested in. Have we got any more questions or comments, please, for John? No, thank you very much, John. That was a really interesting report, actually, a look into the future. So thank you very much for that. This is a noting item and it has been noted. So we'll now move on to item 10, Pension Fund Risk Register, and you'll find that on pages 71 to 94 in your agenda pack. So the risk register is for the pension board to consider whether there are any actions that are required in relation to any issues contained in the report. I would also refer the board members to pages 91 and 94, which pick out the risks identified specifically in respect of the national COVID emergency and some of the steps taken to address those risks. John Clues, do you want anything to add to that? You're muted, John.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, Chair. I think it's worth. We're supposed to put the risk register in, and the pension board is supposed to review it at each of the meetings. I thought it'd be useful, though. I mean, obviously, board members can read and look at the main risk register, but I thought for this particular meeting would be worth looking at what the pension fund has done in relation to COVID. And at the time of the lockdown, myself and Tamsin got together and put together a sort of semi-risk register listing some of the issues that we were identifying as part of the COVID emergency and how we were trying to address them. And I think the first thing I would say to Pension Board is that at the time of the lockdown on the 24th of March, and I think that will stay in our minds for a good few years, the pension fund and certainly the admin team had started to work towards working from home. We had the previous year, in fact, been all issued with laptops under the County Council's sort of rollout of new technology, which put us in a really good stead. So we were able to move to a home working solution very quickly, even prior to the COVID lockdown, when it looked as if it was going to happen. So that was a really good move. We did experience a few difficulties because the infrastructure of the county council was such that a lot of people went onto home working at the same time, and therefore there had to be a build-up of capacity. So the first couple of weeks we did experience a few difficulties, but by and large we were able to sit at home and work from our kitchens and living rooms and goodness knows where else. But at that particular point in time as well, the pensions regulator was giving out advice on working from home and some of the main issues that that we were required to do. So clearly, it was very important that the fund continue to pay pension members and those pension members who were moving to retirement. And we certainly picked out a number of priorities. Also, the pension regulator identified the issue of scams at that particular point in time, as again people were furloughed and people were potentially losing their jobs or needing to access money quite quickly. The regulator was quite concerned that people would take decisions that were detrimental to their pensions. We didn't see an awful lot of that, although certainly a number of deferred members who were able to take their pensions at 55 and over started to come through the system in terms of accessing pensions, because again we presumed that they needed additional resources at that particular point in time. So we try to address those particular issues as part of our a risk register. We try to make sure that we were able to produce our annual benefit statements, and that was one of the number of first priorities, because we were working towards collecting scheme data from scheme employers. It was year end, and in fact we were able to collect the data. We'd got information out to scheme employers prior to the lockdown, and they were, although coming back slightly later than we would have expected, all scheme employers eventually gave us their data to enable the output of annual benefit statements. So we met with that. Like I say, we moved on to pension benefits, made sure that was happening. What are the other bits? Certainly transfers was high on the agenda. There were a number of processes and transfers that were happening at the time of lockdown, and due to administrative pressures and resource availability, we were slightly slower at addressing some of those, and we actually put some on hold until such time as resources were available. But we were also again trying to raise awareness, and we put a number of comments and information on the website for members to access around the lockdown and the impact and risks that members might have been open to at the time. One of the other concerns was around employee contributions not being paid over. Again, this was identified as a critical risk at that particular point in time, and we did remind a number of scheme employers about their legal responsibilities in terms of paying their contributions. One of the other activities was looking at employers with funding issues, because clearly there were some employers who weren't getting any income in and would possibly cease trading. There's only actually one employer that has requested or did request not to pay their employer contributions. So we've looked into that. We drafted a policy backed up by the LGA, and a single employer has been given a deferment actually were due to review that, and that was a leisure company who were running a number of swimming pools, and therefore was actually impacted on by the COVID emergency. However, that was obviously also to help them to continue to trade. I think they were the main things for the pensions administration, and I don't know whether Kieran wants to add anything around the investment side, as Tamsin wasn't able to make the meeting, but I'm happy also to take questions on the admin points.
Karen, do you wish to add anything to what John's told us?
Well, the same systems that I think John relied on the admin side served us well on the investment side. We were still able from our own homes to continue managing the pension fund investments in much the same way as we'd previously been able to in the office. All the meetings that we used to have with various fund managers, we now have those meetings via Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc. Our ability to deal with the if you like, the administrative side of the investments hasn't been affected in any way really, because we were already working in a flexible way before the COVID crisis happened. From time to time, we do need to actually print something out and sign it for legal reasons when you make investments. Not all of us in the team have a printer, but it's not an insurmountable problem. That it's just a minor technical thing. I mean, the investments themselves, obviously, at the start of the year, the size of the fund was reduced somewhat when the markets, I imagine, suffered from the COVID problems. Just for illustrative, just to give you an idea, last December, because we value the fund quarterly, the fund was valued at 5.8 billion. By the time we got to the valuation at the end of March, that was down to 5 billion because of, if you like, COVID-related problems. But it has recovered somewhat. We're now, the latest valuation back in September puts us at 5.6. It's about 96% of the valuation as it was back in December. So, and I think that's broadly in line with the market. Different sectors have weathered the storm differently. I mean, property, for instance, especially office property and certain retail properties have suffered, and that sector in the pension fund has suffered accordingly, as various proprietors have asked for rent reductions and rent holidays and things like that. So I think property is perhaps the bit of the portfolio that has kind of dragged the size of the fund down. But Aberdeen, our property investment managers, are kind of reworking the portfolio, I think, to overcome those problems now. So we are slowly recovering. There's no problems on the investment side really, and on administering the investments, no real problems there either. So all the risks, I think, on the investments are certainly being managed effectively.
Thank you, John and Karen. To debate this, I will move it. Can I have a seconder, please? That's Mark. Thank you very much. David, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a practical question, really. Supposing an employer did fail, for argument's sake, what would be the actual impact on the pension fund itself, particularly if that employer was carrying a deficit?
John, please.
That's a good question. Well, hopefully, and we've looked into this in terms of the risk. Generally, majority of the scheme employers, we've got bonds in place to cover that eventuality in terms of the risk to the fund. That's the general way that it is addressed, but it depends on the type of employer. So a number of the smaller employers who are risked, we have some, like I say, processes in place to address the risk, and the actuary itself, when they do the valuation, look at those risks on a valuation basis as well. So we have a position in place where we can cover off that risk on most of scheme employers, not necessarily all of them.
So the impact to the fund would be minimal in reality, in the sense that it wouldn't open up any further liabilities or whatever. The
majority of them are covered off. So I think if we were to say that there's a high profile position at the moment from one of the larger scheme employers as that has failed and has access into the scheme, so we're talking about a company within the city, that is covered through a risk bond arrangement for a proportion of the value, plus also the managing scheme employer is covering off a part of that risk as well.
So any deficit isn't allocated across the remaining employers, for argument's sake?
No, no. One of the issues that there is in some of the areas is that where there's pooled funds, where that may be the case, but generally it's covered off by securities.
That's fair enough. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Any more comments or questions, please? No, thank you very much, Jonathan, and for giving such an insightful look at it. It's does seem like a minefield, but you seem to have the handle on it, which is good. So thank you very much for that. Right, so we'll now move to the vote. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No? Well, that is carried. Thank you very much. And that concludes the business of the board. I would like to thank all members and officers for their contributions. Can I just remind all members and officers to stay on the call after we have shut down the link with YouTube and members of the public, so we can have a presentation by Heather Dickinson. So thank you very much, and thank you any members of the public that are tuning in. I hope you found it interesting. So thank you very much. You can close the public link, please.